Welcome, Wapham crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, and otherworldly beings. Let's climb aboard the mothership, secure our tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. I'm your ghostess, TessaTNT, and I'm broadcasting from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, wherever you may be out there beyond the Omniverse, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you're here, safe and sound, and ready for some story time. So I was going to do a live tonight, but the internet's just been really unreliable, and I don't want to put you guys through that. So perhaps next weekend, I'm hoping that this new internet company that I've been talking to, Clear Networks, I believe it is, will be showing up soon, because we really need some new and good internet going on. If you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it or working out, feel free to look me up under Spreaker.com at We Are Paradox Media, or We Are Paradox Media wherever you listen to your broadcasts and podcasts. So this evening we will be finishing our book by H.P. Lovecraft, and the book is known as The Dunwich Horror. I thought we were going to be able to finish it last night, but unfortunately we ran out of time, and I did get online and look under the Marmot program and found us another book to be reading after that. A change in the quality of the daylight increased, and the crowd gazed about the horizon in wonder. A purplish darkness, born of nothing more than a spectral deepening of the sky's blue, pressed down upon the rumbling hills. Then the lightning flashed again, somewhat brighter than before, and the crowd fancied that it had showed a certain mistiness around the altar stone on the distant height. No one, however, had been using the telescope at that instant. The whippoorwills continued their irregular pulsation, and the men of Dunwich braced themselves tensely against some imponderable menace with which the atmosphere seemed supercharged. Without warning came those deep, cracked, gracious vocal sounds, which will never leave the memory of the stricken group who heard them. Not from any human throat were they born, for the organs of man can yield no such acoustic perversions. Rather would one have said they came from the pit itself, had not their source been so unmistakably the altar stone on the peak. It is almost erroneous to call them sounds at all, since so much of their ghastly, infrabass timbre spoke to dim seats of consciousness and terror, far subtler than the ear. Yet one must do so, since their form was indisputably, though vaguely, that of half-articulate words. They were loud as the rumblings and the thunder above which they echoed. Yet did they come from no visible being, and because imagination might suggest a conjectural source in the world of non-visible beings. The huddled crowd at the mountain's base huddled still closer, and winced as if in expectation of a blow. Yogg-Sothoth, rang the hideous croaking out of space. You think? Aye. Her speaking impulse seemed to falter here, as if some frightful psychic struggle were going on. Henry Wheeler strained his eye at the telescope, but saw only the three grotesquely silhouetted human figures on the peak, all moving their arms furiously in strange gestures as their incantation drew near its culmination. From what black wells of acherontic fear or filling, from what unplumbed gulfs of extracosmic consciousness or obscure, long-latent heredity were those half-articulate thunder-croakings drawn? Presently they began to gather renewed force and coherence as they grew in stark, utter, ultimate frenzy. Ya-ya-ya-ya-ya-ha. Ya-ya-ya-ya. Nga. Nga. Here. Here. Help. Help. Father. Father. Yog Sothoth. But that was all. Pallid group in the road, still reeling at the undisputably English syllables that had poured thickly and thunderously down from the frantic vacancy, beside that shocking altar stone, were never to hear such syllables again. Instead, they jumped violently at the terrific report which seemed to rend the hills, the deafening, cataclysmic peal whose source, be it inner earth or sky, no hearer was ever able to place. A single lightning bolt shot from the purple zenith to the altar stone, and a great tidal wave of viewless force and indescribable stench swept down from the hill to all the countryside. Trees, grass, and underbrush were whipped into a fury, and the frightened crowd at the mountain's base, weakened by the lethal fetter that seemed about to asphyxiate them, were almost hurled off their feet. Dogs howled from the distance. Green gas and foliage wilted to a curious, sickly yellow-gray, and over field and forest were scattered the bodies of dead whippoorwills. The stench left quickly, but the vegetation never came right again. To this day there is something queer and unholy about the growths on and around that fearsome hill. Curtis Whatley was only just regaining consciousness when the Arkham men came slowly down the mountain in the beams of a sunlight once more brilliant and untainted. They were grave and quiet and seemed shaken by memories and reflections even more terrible than those which had reduced the group of natives to a state of cowed quivering. In reply to a jumble of questions, they only shook their heads and reaffirmed one vital fact. The thing has gone forever, Armitage said. It has been split up into what it was originally made of, and can never exist again. It was an impossibility in a normal world. Only the least fraction was really matter in any sense we know. It was like its father, and most of it has gone back to him in some vague realm or dimension outside our material universe. Some vague abyss, out of which only the most accursed rites of human blasphemy could ever have called him for a moment on the hills. There was a brief silence, and in that pause, the scattered senses of poor Curtis Whatley began to knit back into a sort of continuity, so that he puts his hands to his head with a moan. Memory seemed to pick itself up where it had left off, and the horror of the sight that had prostrated him burst in upon him again. Oh, my God, that half-face on top of it, that face with the red eyes and crinkly albino hair, and no chin, like the Whatleys. It was an octopus, centipede, spider, kingo thing. There was a half-shaped man's face on top of it, and it looked like Wizard Whatley's, only it was yards and yards across. He paused, exhausted, as the whole group of natives stared in the bewilderment, not quite crystallized into fresh terror. Only old Zebulon Whatley, who wanderingly remembered ancient things, but who had been silent heretofore, spoke aloud. 15 year gone, he rumbled, I heard old Whatley say as how some day we'd hear a child o' Lavinies a-calling its father's name on the top of O Sentinel Hill. But Joe Osborne interrupted him to question the Arkham men anew. What was it, anyhow? And however did young Wizard Whatley call it out o' the air it come from? Armitage chose his words carefully. It was mostly a kind of force that doesn't belong in our part of space. A kind of force that acts and grows and shapes itself by other laws than those of our sort of nature. We have no business calling in such things from outside, and the only very wicked people and very wicked cults ever tried to. There was some of it in Wilbur Whatley himself, enough to make a devil and a precocious monster of him, and to make his passing out a pretty terrible sight. I'm going to burn his accursed diary, and if you men are wise, you'll dynamite that altar stone up there, and pull down all the rings of standing stones on the other hills. Things like that brought down the beings those Whatleys were so fond of, the beings that they were going to let in tangibly to wipe out the human race and drag the earth off to some nameless place for some nameless purpose. But as to this thing we've just sent back, the Whatleys raised it for a terrible part in the doings that were to come. It grew fast and big from the same reason that Wilbur grew fast and big. And it beat him because it had a greater share of the outsideness in it. You needn't ask how Wilbur called it out of the air. He didn't call it out. It was his twin brother, but it looked more like the father than he did. Oh my goodness, that was the end. Wow. Okay. Threw me for a loop there. Wasn't expecting that. And this was by, of course, H.P. Lovecraft. But it appears to have been published by The Floating Press, and it's got an empty boat floating on the water. The second book that I was going to read is a MEGAPACK. It's called The Horror MEGAPACK, 25 Modern and Classic Horror Stories. We have the author H.P. Lovecraft, we have author Robert E. Howard, Darrell Schweitzer, Henry Kuttner, William F. Nolan, Seabury Quinn, John Gregory Betancourt, and more. But wait, there's more. Come on now, let me turn the page. Okay, how does this work? I'm just gonna refresh it really quick. Have you guys noticed how all the stocks and Bitcoin are just falling like rocks? That's crazy. Hey, open up, let's go. But maybe I'll have to go back to the library thing and reopen it. Uno momento, por favor. Alright, we got it going now. A note from the publisher. Over the past few years, our MEGAPACK series of ebook anthologies has proved to be one of our most popular endeavors. Maybe it helps that we sometimes offer them as premiums to our mailing list. One question we keep getting asked is, who's the editor? The MEGAPACKs, except, or specifically credited, are a group effort. Everyone at Wildside works on them. This includes John Betancourt, Carla Coop, Steve Coop, Bonner Minking, Colin Azariah Gribbs, A.E. Warren, and many of the Wildside's authors who often suggest stories to include and not just their own. Recommend a favorite story? Do you know a great classic science fiction story or have a favorite author whom you believe is perfect for the MEGAPACK series? We'd love your suggestions. You can post them on our message board at movies.ning.com/forum. And they put a note down here that says, unfortunately, as hard as we try, a few typos did slip through. We update our ebooks periodically, so make sure you have the current version. And that was by John Betancourt, publisher, Wildside Press, LLC. And you may contact him or whoever you'd like from the Wildside Press at www.wildsidepress.com. Ooh. So it comes in, wow, different packs. So the first section seems to be stories about mystery. That should be interesting. Dragon. Actually, it's Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. I am writing this under an unforeseeable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their latter degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with the water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to disappear in my solitude upon the heaving vastnesses of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. The one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at my prodigious and unexpected transformation of scenery. I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hammock, which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled toward the hammock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into the fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of a stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the surroundings, zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water floated at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size were an array of bas reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of Adore. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shewn disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere resemblance and remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline despite webbed hands and feet. Shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures were shewn in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe, some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then suddenly I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing, I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know what I heard, peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god, but soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account of the information for the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not have all been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window! The Children of the Night by Robert E. Howard. There were, I remember, 6 of us in Conrad's bizarrely fashioned study, with its queer relics from all over the world and its long rows of books which ranged from Mandrake Press edition to Boccaccio to the Missale Romanum, bound in clasped oak boards and printed in Venice, 1740. Clements and Professor Killerwan had just engaged in a somewhat testy anthropological argument. Clements upholding the theory of a separate, distinct alpine race, while the professor maintained that this so-called race was merely a deviation from an original Aryan stock, possibly the result of an admixture between the southern or Mediterranean races and the Nordic people. "And how," asked Clements, "do you account for their brachycephalism? The Mediterraneans were as long-headed as the Aryans. Would admixture between these dolichocephalic peoples produce a broad-headed intermediate type?" "Special conditions might bring about a change in an originally long-headed race," snapped Kirawan. "Bose has demonstrated, for instance, that in the case of immigrants to America, skull formations often range in one generation. And Flinders Petrie has shown that the Lombards changed from a long-headed to a round-headed race in a few centuries." "But what caused these changes?" "Much is yet unknown to science," answered Kirawan, "and we need not be dogmatic. No one knows as yet why people of British and Irish ancestry tend to grow unusually tall in the Darling district of Australia. Cornstalks, as they are called, are why people of such descent generally have thinner jaw structures after a few generations in New England. The universe is full of unexplainable, and therefore the uninteresting, according to McCann, laughed Darrell. Conrad shook his head. I must disagree. To me, the unknowable is most tantalizingly fascinating. Which accounts, no doubt, for all the works on witchcraft and demonology I see on your shelves, said Kettrick, with a wave of his hand toward the rows of books. And let me speak of Kettrick. Each of the 6 of us was of the same breed, this is to say, a Briton or an American of British descent. By British I include all natural inhabitants of the British Isles. We represented various strains of English and Celtic blood, but basically these strains are the same after all. But Kettrick, to me the man always seemed strangely alien. It was in his eyes that this difference showed externally. They were a sort of amber, almost yellow, and slightly oblique. At times when one looked at his face from certain angles, they seemed to slant like a Chinaman's. Others then I had noticed this feature so unusual in a man of pure Anglo-Saxon descent. The usual myths ascribing his slanted eyes to some prenatal influence had been mooted about, and I remember Professor Hendrik Breuer once remarked that Kendrick was undoubtedly an atavism, representing a reversion of type to some dim and distant ancestor of Mongolian blood. A sort of freak reversion, since none of his family showed such traces. Kettrick comes of the Welsh branch of the Celtics of Sussex, and his lineage is set down in the Book of Peers. There you may read the line of his ancestry which extends unbroken to the days of Canute. No slightest trace of Mongoloid intermixture appears in the genealogy, and how could there have been such intermixture in Old Saxon England? For Kettrick is the modern form of Cedric, and though that branch fled into Wales before the invasion of the Danes, its male heirs consistently married with English families on the border marches, and it remains a pure line of the powerful Cedrics, almost pure Saxon. As for the man himself, this defect of his eyes, if it can be called a defect, is his only abnormality, except for a slight and occasional lisping of speech. He is highly intellectual and a good companion, except for a slight aloofness and a rather callous indifference which may serve to mask an extremely sensitive nature. Referring to his remark, I said with a laugh, Conrad pursues the obscure and mystic as some men pursue romance. His shelves throng with delightful nightmares of every variety. Our host nodded. You'll find there are a number of delectable dishes. Mockin, Poe, Blackwood, Maturin. Look, there's a rare feast. Horrid Mysteries, by the Marquis of Gros, the real 18th century edition. Taverell scanned the shelves. Weird fiction seems to vie with works on witchcraft, voodoo, and dark magic. True, historians and chronicles are often dull. Tell-weavers never the masters, I mean. A voodoo sacrifice can be described in such a dull manner as to take all the real fantasy out of it, and leave it merely a sordid murder. I will admit that few writers of fiction touch the true heights of horror. Most of their stuff is too concrete, given too much earthly shape and dimensions. But in such tales as Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, Machen's Black Sill, and Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, the 3 master horror tales to my mind, the reader is borne into dark and outer realms of imagination. But look there, continued. There, sandwiched between the nightmare of Huysmans and Walpole's castle of Otranto, Von Junt's Nameless Cults, there's a book to keep you awake at night. I've read it, said Darrell, and I'm convinced the man is mad. His work is like the conversation of a maniac. It runs with startling clarity for a while, then suddenly merges into vagueness and disconnected ramblings. Conrad shook his head. Have you ever thought that perhaps it is his very sanity that causes him to write in that fashion? What if he dares not put on paper all he knows? What if his vague suspicions or suppositions are dark and mysterious hints, keys to the puzzle to those who know? Bosh? This from Kirawan. Are you intimating that any of the nightmare cults referred to by von Juntz survive to this day, if they ever existed save in the hag-ridden brain of a lunatic poet and philosopher? Not he alone used hidden meanings, answered Conrad. If you will scan various works of certain great poets, you may find double meanings. Men have stumbled onto cosmic secrets in the past and given a hint of them to the world in cryptic words. Do you remember von Juntz's hints of a city in the wastes? What do you think of Flecker's line? Pass not beneath, men say their blows in stony deserts still arose, but with no scarlet to relieve, and from whose heart no perfume flows. Men may stumble upon secret things, but von Juntz dipped deep into forbidden mysteries. He was one of the few men, for instance, who could read the Necronomicon in the original Greek translation. Darrell shrugged his shoulders, and Professor Kirawan, though he snorted and puffed viciously at his pipe, made no direct reply. For he, as well as Conrad, had delved into the Latin version of the book and had found there things not even a cold-blooded scientist could answer or refute. Well, he said presently, suppose we admit the former existence of cults revolving about such nameless and ghastly gods and entities as Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, Sathogwa, Golgoroth, and the like. I cannot find it in my mind to believe that survivals of such cults lurk in dark corners of the world today. To our surprise, Clements answered. He was a tall, lean man, silent almost to the point of taciturnity, and his fierce struggles with poverty in his youth had lined his face beyond his years. Like many other artists, he lived a distinctly dual literary life. His swashbuckling novels furnished him a generous income, and his editorial position on the Cloven Hoof affording him full artistic expression. The Cloven Hoof was a poetry magazine whose bizarre contents had often aroused and shocked interest of the conservative critics. You remember von Juntz makes mention of a so-called Broncolt, said Clements, stuffing his pipe bowl with a peculiarly villainous brand of shag tobacco. I think I heard you and Darrell discussing it once. As I gather from his hints, snapped Kirawan, von Juntz includes this particular cult among those still in existence. Absurd. Again Clements shook his head. When I was a boy, working my way through a certain university, I had for a roommate a lad as poor and ambitious as I. If I told you his name, it would startle you. Though he came of an old Scotch line of Galloway, he was obviously of a non-Aryan type. This is in the strictest confidence, you understand, but my roommate talked in his sleep. I began to listen and put his disjointed mumbling together, and in his mutterings I first heard of the ancient cult hinted by von Juntz, of the king who rules the Dark Empire, which was a revival of an older, darker empire dating back into the Stone Age, and of the great nameless cavern where stands the Dark Man, the image of Bran Macmorn, carved in his likeness by a master hand, while the great king yet lived, and to which each worshipper of Bran makes a pilgrimage once in his or her lifetime. Yes, that cult lives today in the descendants of Bran's people, a silent unknown current it flows on in the great ocean of life, waiting for the stone image of the great Bran to breathe and move with sudden life, and come from the great cavern to rebuild their lost empire. And who were the people of that empire? Asked Kettrick. Picts, answered Darrell. Doubtless the people known later as the Wild Picts of Galloway were predominantly Celtic, a mixture of Gaelic, Cymric, Aboriginal, and possibly Teutonic elements. Whether they took their name from the older race or lent their own name to that race is a matter yet to be decided. But when von Juntz speaks of Picts, he refers specifically to the small, dark, garlic-eating peoples of the Mediterranean blood who brought the Neolithic culture into Britain. The first settlers of that country, in fact, who gave rise to the tales of earth spirits and goblins. I cannot disagree to that last statement, said Conrad. These legends ascribe a deformity and inhumaneness of appearances to the characters. There was nothing about the Picts to excite such horror and repulsion in the Aryan peoples. I believe that the Mediterraneans were preceded by the Mongoloid type, very low in the scale of development. Whence these tales? Quite true, broke in Kirawan, but I hardly think they preceded the Picts as you call them into Britain. We find troll and dwarf legends all over the continent, and I am inclined to think that both the Mediterranean and Aryan people brought these tales with them from the continent. They must have been of extremely inhuman aspects, those early Mongoloids. At least, said Conrad, here is a flint mallet a miner found in the Welsh hills and gave to me, which has never been fully explained. It is obviously of no ordinary Neolithic make. See how small it is compared to most implements of that age, almost like a child's toy, yet it is surprisingly heavy, and no doubt a deadly blow could be dealt with it. I fitted the handle to it myself, and you would be surprised to know how difficult it was to carve it into a shape and balance corresponding with the head. I looked at the thing. It was well made, polished somewhat like the other remnants of the Neolithic I had seen, yet as Conrad said, it was strangely different. Its small size was oddly disquieting, for it had no appearance of a toy otherwise. It was as sinister in suggestion as an Aztec sacrificial dagger. Conrad had fashioned the oaken handle with a rare skill, and in carving it to fit the head, had managed to give it the same unnatural appearance as the mallet itself had. He had even copied the workmanship of the primal times, fixing the head into the cleft of the haft with rawhide. My word! Darrell made a clumsy pass at an imaginary antagonist and nearly shattered a costly Shang vase. The balance of the thing is all off-center. I'd have to readjust all my mechanics of poise and equilibrium to handle it. Let me see it. Kettrick took the thing and fumbled with it, trying to strike the secret of its proper handling. At length, somewhat irritated, he swung it up and struck a heavy blow at the shield which hung on the wall nearby. I was standing near it. I saw the hellish mallet twist in his hand like a live serpent, and his arm wrenched out of line. I heard a shout of alarmed warning. Then darkness came with the impact of the mallet against my head. I'm thinking, since there's a separator there, that we should stop there and go to our first music break. I know it's not quite time, but it will do. It will do. Sorry, my brother and mom and sister are trying to call me. Alright, so on this break we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage with her band Antidote for Savages. With Let Me Be Your Home, Lemire and Crypto, Your Skeleton, and Our New Reality. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
Take me to your leader or leave me alone. Somebody please let me out. the shit that he brings anymore. You're mine. You're mine. Tonight. You're mine. In a sea of broken hearts, won't let you fall apart. We'll make a brand new start when you're coming back. I wanna take a ride. I wanna show him love. I wanna knock him down. Come with me to our new reality. You don't need all the shit that he brings anymore. You're mine. You're mine. Tonight. You're mine. Come with me to our new reality. You don't need all the shit that he brings anymore. You're mine. You're mine. Tonight. You're mine. You're mine. You're mine.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. We are reading a book that is a compilation of many stories. It's the horror MEGAPACK 25 classic horror stories. 25 modern and classic horror stories. And just so you guys know, if you want to read this on your own, just get a library card for your local library, and they should have a app or a link or whatnot, just like the one I have, where you can actually check out books online. You don't even have to wait for the little tablet thingy they used to give you. Kindle. I used that once. It was when I was reading The Great Gatsby, and it was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that story. I still haven't seen the movie. I kind of don't want to, because the book is always better than the movie. Alright, keep your fingers crossed for me that these stocks and Bitcoin come up. I need to sell a certain amount so I can get my wood lathe and I want to sell at the best value instead of getting lowballed, but sometimes you gotta bite the bullet, and that's how life works. Alright, we're getting back into it. The story we are now reading is... It says it's a note from the publisher. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. The Children of the Night is what we're reading at the moment. Alright. Oh. Guess I right-click it? How do I get rid of that thingy right there? Huh. Oh well. Slowly I drifted back to consciousness. First there was a dull sensation with mindlessness, blindness, and total lack of knowledge as to where I was or what I was. Then vague realization of life and being and a hard something pressing into my ribs. Then the mist cleared and I came to myself completely. I lay on my back half beneath some underbrush and my head throbbed fiercely. I like that. I laid on my back half. Also my hair was caked and clotted with blood, for the scalp had been laid open. But my eyes traveled down my body and limbs, naked but for a deerskin loincloth and sandals of the same material, and found no other wound. That which pressed so uncomfortably into my ribs was my axe, on which I had fallen. Now an abhorrent babble reached my ears and stung me into clear consciousness. The noise was faintly like language, but not such language as men are accustomed to. It sounded much like the repeated hissing of many great snakes. I stared. I lay in great gloomy forest. The glade was overshadowed so that even in the daytime it was very dark. Aye, that forest was dark, cold, silent, gigantic, and utterly grisly, and I looked into the glade. I saw shambles. 5 men lay there at least, what had been 5 men. Now, as I marked the abhorrent mutilations, my soul sickened, and about clustered the mutilations, things. Humans they were, of a sort, though I did not consider them so. They were short and stocky, with broad heads too large for their scrawny bodies. Their hair was snaky and stringy, their faces broad and square, with flat noses, hideously slanted eyes, a thin gash for a mouth, and pointed ears. They wore the skins of beasts, as did I, but these hides were but crudely dressed. They bore small bows and flint-tipped arrows, flint knives and cudgels, and they conversed in a speech as hideous as themselves, a hissing, reptilian speech that filled me with dread and loathing. Oh, I hated them as I lay there, my brain flamed with white-hot fury. Now I remembered. We had hunted, we 6 youths of the Sword People, and wandered far into the grim forest, which our people generally shunned. Weary of the chase, we had paused to rest. To me had been given the first watch, for in those days no sleep was safe without a sentry. Now shame and revulsion shook my whole being. I had slept, I had betrayed my comrades, and now they lay gashed and mangled, butchered while they slept, by vermin who had never dared to stand before them on equal terms. I, a Rayara, had betrayed my trust. I remembered. I had slept, and in the midst of a dream of the hunt, fire and sparks had exploded in my head, and I had plunged into a deeper darkness, where there were no dreams. And now the penalty, they who had stolen through the dense forest and smitten me senseless had not paused to mutilate me. Thinking me dead, they had hastened swiftly to their grisly work. Now perhaps they had forgotten me for a time. I had sat somewhat apart from the others, and when struck had fallen half under some bushes, but soon they would remember me. I would hunt no more, dance no more in the dances of hunt and love and war, see no more the wattle huts of the sword people. But I had no wish to escape back to my people. Should I slink back with my tale of infamy and disgrace? Should I hear the words of scorn my tribe would fling at me? See the girls point their contemptuous fingers at the youth who slept and betrayed his comrades to the knives of vermin? Tears stung my eyes, and slow hate heaved up in my bosom and my brain. I would never bear the sword that marked the warrior. I would never triumph over worthy foes and die gloriously beneath the arrows of the Picts, or the axes of the wolf people, or the river people. I would go down to death beneath a nauseous rabble, whom the Picts had long ago driven into the forest dens like rats, and made rage gripped me and dried my tears, giving me their stead a berserk blaze of wrath. If such reptiles were to bring about my downfall, I would make it a fall long remembered, if such beasts had memories. Moving cautiously, I shifted until my hand was on the haft of my axe. Then I called on Ilmarinen and bounded up as a tiger springs. And as a tiger springs, I was among my enemies, and mashed a flat skull as a man crashed the head of a snake. A sudden wild clamor of fear broke from my victims, and for an instant they closed around me, hacking and stabbing. A knife gashed my chest, but I gave no heed. A red mist waved before my eyes, and my body and limbs moved in perfect accord with my fighting brain. Snarling, hacking, and smiting, I was a tiger among reptiles. In an instant they gave way and fled, leaving me bestriding half a dozen stunted bodies. But I was not satiated. I was close on the heels of the tallest one, whose head would perhaps come to my shoulder, and whom seemed to be their chief. He fled down a sort of runway, squealing like a monstrous lizard, and when I was close at his shoulder, he dived snake-like into the bushes, but I was too swift for him, and I dragged him forth and butchered him in a most gory fashion. And through the bushes I saw the trail he was striving to reach, a path winding in and out among the trees, almost too narrow to allow the traversing of it by a man of normal size. I hacked off my victim's hideous head, and carrying it in my left hand went up the serpent path with my red axe in my right. Now as I strode swiftly along the path and blood splashed beside my feet at every step from the severed jugular of my foe, I thought of those I hunted. Aye, we held them in so little esteem. We hunted by day in the forest, they hunted, now haunted. What they called themselves we never knew, for none of our tribe ever learned the accursed hissing sibilances they used as speech. But we called them children of the night. And night things they were indeed, for they slunk in the depths of the dark forests, and in subterraneous dwellings, venturing forth into the hills only when their conquerors slept. It was at night that they did their foul deeds, the quick flight of a flint-tipped arrow to slay cattle, or perhaps a loitering human, the snatching of a child that had wandered from the village. But it was for more than this we gave them their name. They were in truth people of night and darkness in the ancient horror-ridden shadows of bygone ages. For these creatures were very old, and they represented an outworn age. They had once overrun and possessed this land, and they had been driven into hiding and obscurity by the dark, fierce little Picts, with whom we contested now, and who hated and loathed them as savagely as did we. The Picts were different from us in general appearance, being shorter of stature and dark of hair, eyes, and skin, whereas we were tall and powerful, with yellow hair and light eyes. They were cast in the same mold. For all of that, these children of the night seemed not human to us, with their deformed, dwarfish bodies, yellow skin, and hideous faces. Aye, they were reptiles, vermin. And my brain was like to burst with fury when I thought that it was these vermin on whom I was to glut my axe and perish. Bah, there is no glory slaying snakes or dying from their bites. All this rage and fierce disappointment turned on the objects of my hatred, and with the old red mist waving in front of me, I swore by all the gods I knew to wreak such red havoc before I died as to leave a dread memory in the minds of the survivors. My people would not honor me, in such contempt they held the children. Those children that I left alive would remember me and shudder. So I swore, gripping savagely my axe, which was a bronze set in a cleft of the oaken haft and fastened securely with rawhide. Now I heard ahead a sibilant, abhorrent murmur, and a vile stench filtered to me through the trees. Human, yet less than human. A few moments more and I emerged from the deep shadows into a wide open space. I had never before seen a village of the children. There was a cluster of earthen domes with low doorways sunk into the ground. Squalid dwelling places, half above and half below the earth, and I knew from the talk of the old warriors that these dwelling places were connected by underground corridors. So the whole village was like an ant bed or a system of snake holes, and I wondered if other tunnels did not run off under the ground and emerged long distances from the villages. Before the domes clustered a vast group of creatures hissing and jabbering at a great rate. I had quickened my pace, and now as I burst from cover I was running with the fleetness of my race. A wild clamor went up from the rabble as they saw the avenger, tall, bloodstained, and blazing-eyed, leap from the forest, and I cried out fiercely, flung the dripping head among them, and bound like a wounded tiger into the thick of them. Oh, there was no escape for them now. They might have taken their tunnels, but I would have followed, even to the guts of hell. They knew they must slay me, and they closed around 100 strong to do it. There was no wild blaze of glory in my brain as there had been against worthy foes, but the old berserk madness of my race was in my blood, and the smell of blood and destruction in my nostrils. I know not how many I slew, I only know that they thronged about me in a writhing, slashing mass, like serpents about a wolf, and I smote until the axe edge turned and bent, and the axe became no more than a bludgeon. And I smashed skulls, split heads, splintered bones, scattered blood and brains in one red sacrifice to Ilmarinen, god of the sword people. Bleeding from 1/2 wounds, blinded by a slash across the eyes, I felt a flint knife sink deep into my groin, and at the same instant a cudgel laid my scalp open. I went to my knees, but reeled up again and saw in a thick red fog a ring of leering, slant-eyed faces. I slashed out as a dying tiger strikes, and the faces broke in red ruin. And as I sagged, overbalanced by the fury of my stroke, a taloned hand clutched my throat, and a flint blade was driven into my ribs and twisted venomously. Beneath a shower of blows I went down again, but the man with the knife was beneath me, and with my left hand I found him and broke his neck before he could writhe away. Life was waning swiftly. Through the hissing and howling of the children I could hear the voice of Ilmarinen. Yet once again I rose stubbornly through a very whirlwind of cudgels and spears. I could no longer see my foes, even in a red mist, but I could feel my blows and knew they surged about me. I braced my feet, gripped my slippery axe haft with both hands, and calling once more on Ilmarinen, I heaved up the axe and struck one last terrific blow. And I must have died on my feet, for there was no sensation of falling, even as I knew, with a last thrill of savagery, that slew Even as I felt the splintering of skulls beneath my axe, darkness came with oblivion. I came suddenly to myself. I was half reclining in a big armchair, and Conrad was pouring water on me. My head was ached, and a trickle of blood had half dried on my face. Kirawan, Tavarel, and Clements were hovering about, anxiously, while Kettrick stood just in front of me. Still holding the mallet, his face schooled to a polite perturbation which his eyes did not show, and at the sight of those cursed eyes a red madness surged up in me. "There," Conrad was saying, "I told you he'd come out of it in a moment. Just a light crack. He's taken harder than that. All right now, aren't you, O'Donnell?" At that I swept them aside, and with a single low snarl of hatred launched myself at Kettrick. Taken utterly by surprise, he had no opportunity to defend himself. My hands locked on his throat, and we crashed together on the ruins of a divan. The others cried out in amazement and horror and sprang to separate us, or rather to tear me from my victim, for already Kettrick's slant eyes were beginning to start from their sockets. "God's sake, O'Donnell!" exclaimed Conrad, seeking to break my grip. "What's come over you? Kettrick didn't mean to hit you. Let go, you idiot!" A fierce wrath almost overcame me at these men who were my friends, men of my own tribe, and I swore at them and their blindness as they finally managed to tear my strangling fingers from Kettrick's throat. He sat up and choked and explored the blue marks my fingers had left while I raged and cursed, nearly defeating the combined efforts of the floor to hold me. "You fools!" I screamed. "Let me go! Let me do my duty as a tribesman! You blind fools! I care nothing for the paltry blow he dealt me. He has dealt stronger blows than that against me in bygone ages. You fools! He is marked with the brand of the beast, the reptile, the vermin we exterminated centuries ago. I must crush him, stamp him out, rid the clean earth of his accursed pollution." So I raved and struggled, and Conrad gasped Kettrick over his shoulder. "Get out, quick! He's out of his head. His mind is unhinged. Get away from him." Now I look out over the ancient dreaming downs and the hills and deep forest beyond, and I ponder. Somehow, that blow from that ancient accursed mallet knocked me back into another age and another life. Well, I was Ariara. I had no cognizance of any other life. It was no dream. It was a stray bit of reality wherein I, John O'Donnell, once lived and died, and back into which I was snatched across the voids of time and space by a chance blow. Time and times are but cogwheels unmatched, grinding on oblivious to one another. Occasionally, oh very rarely, the cogs fit. The pieces of the plot snap together momentarily and give men faint glimpses beyond the veil of this everyday blindness we call reality. I am John O'Donnell, and I was Ariara, who dreamed dreams of war glory and hunt glory and feast glory, and who died on a red heap of his victims in some lost age. But in what age and where? The last I can answer for you. Mountains and rivers change their contours, the landscapes alter, but the downs least of all. I look out upon them now, and I remember them, not only with John O'Donnell's eyes, but with the eyes of Ariara. They are but little changed, only the great forest has shrunk and dwindled, and in many, many places vanished utterly. But here on these very downs Ariara lived and fought and loved, and in yonder forest he died. Kirawan was wrong. The little fierce dark Picts were not the first men in the Isles. They were beings before them, the children of the night. Legends. Why the children were not unknown to us when we came into what is now the Isle of Britain. We had encountered them before, ages before. Already we had our myths of them, but we found them in Britain, nor had the Picts totally exterminated them. Nor had the Picts, as so many believe, preceded us by many centuries. We drove them before us as we came, in that long drift from the east. I, Ariara, knew old men who had marched on that century-long trek, who had been born in the arms of yellow-haired women over countless miles of forest and plain, and who as youths had walked in the vanguard of the invaders. As to the age, that I cannot say, but I, Ariara, was surely an Aryan, and my people were Aryans, members of one of the 1,000 unknown and unrecorded drifts that scattered yellow-haired, blue-eyed tribes all over the world. The Celts were not the first to come into Western Europe. I, Ariara, was the same blood and appearance as the men who sacked Rome. Mine was a much older strain. Of the language spoke, no echo remains in the waking mind of John O'Donnell. But I knew that Ariara's tongue was to ancient Celtic what ancient Celtic is to modern Gaelic. Ilmarinen, I remember the gold I called upon. The ancient god who worked in metals, in bronze, then. For Ilmarinen was one of the base gods of the Aryans from whom many gods grew, and he was Wieland and Vulcan in the ages of iron. But to Ariara he was Ilmarinen. And Ariara, he was one of many tribes and many drifts. Not alone did the sword people come or dwell in Britain. The river people were before us, and the wolf people came later. But they were Aryans like us, light-eyed and tall and blonde. We fought them for the reason that the various drifts of Aryans have always fought each other, just as the Archaeans fought the Dorians, just as the Celts and Germans cut each other's throats. Aye, just as the Hellenes and the Persians, who were once one people, and of the same drift, split in two different ways on the long trek and centuries later met and flooded Greece and Asia Minor with blood. Now understand, all this I did not know as Ariara. I, Ariara, knew nothing of all these worldwide drifts of my race. I knew only that my people were conquerors, that a century ago my ancestors had dwelt in the same plains far to the east, plains populous with fierce, yellow-haired, light-eyed people like myself. That my ancestors had come westward in a great drift, and in that drift, when my tribesmen met tribes of other races, they trampled and destroyed them. And when they met other yellow-haired, light-eyed people of older or newer drifts, they fought savagely and mercilessly according to the old, illogical custom of the Aryan people. This Ariara knew, and I, John O'Donnell, who know much more and much less than I, Ariara knew, have combined the knowledge of these separate selves and have come to a conclusion that would startle many noted scientists and historians. Yet this fact is well known. Aryans deteriorate swiftly in sedentary and peaceful lives. Their proper existence is a nomadic one. When they settle down to an agricultural existence, they pave the way for their downfall. And when they pin themselves with city walls, they seal their doom. Why, I, Ariara, remember the tales of the old men, how the sons of the sword, on that long drift, found villages of white-skinned, yellow-haired people who had drifted into the West centuries before and had quit the wandering life to dwell among the dark, garlic-eating people and gained their sustenance from the soil. And the old men told how soft and weak they were, and how easily they fell before the bronze blades of the sword's people. Look, is not the whole history of the sons of Aryan laid on those lines? Look, how swiftly has Persian followed Mede, Greek, Persian, Roman, Greek, and German, Roman. Aye, and the Norsemen followed the Germanic, tribes, when they had grown flabby from a century or so of peace and idleness, and despoiled the spoils they had taken in the Southland. But let me speak of Kettrick. The short hairs at the back of my neck bristle at the very mention of his name. A reversion to type, but not to the type of some cleanly Chinaman or Mongol of recent times. The Danes drove his ancestors into the hills of Wales, and there, in what medieval century and in what foul way did that cursed aboriginal taint creep into the clean Saxon blood of the Celtic line, there to lie dormant so long? The Celtic Welsh never mated with the children any more than the Picts did. But there must have been survivals, vermin lurking in those grim hills that had outlasted their time and age. In Ariara's day, they were scarcely human. What must 1,000 years of retrogression have done to the breed? What foul shape stole into the Kettrick castle on some forgotten night, or rose out of the dust to grip some woman of the line, straying in the hills? The mind shrieks from such an image, but this I know. There must have been survivals of that foul, reptilian epoch when the Kettricks went into Wales. There still may be, but this changeling, this waif of darkness, this horror, who bears the noble name of Kettrick, the brand of the serpent is upon him, and until he is destroyed there is no rest for me. Now that I know him for what he is, he pollutes the clean air and leaves the slime of the snake on the green earth. The sound of his lisping, hissing voice fills me with crawling horror, and the sight of his slanted eyes inspires me with madness. For I come of a royal race, and such as he is a continual insult and a threat, like a serpent underfoot. Mine is a regal race, though now it is become degraded and falls into decay by continual admixture with conquered races. The waves of alien blood have washed my hair black and my skin dark, but I still have the lordly stature and the blue eyes of a royal Aryan. And as my ancestors, as I, Ariara, destroyed the scum that writhed beneath our hills, so shall I, John O'Donnell, exterminate the reptilian thing, the monster bred of the snaky taint that slumbered so long unguessed in clean Saxon veins, the vestigial serpent things left to taunt the sons of Aryan. They say the blow I received affected my mind. I know it but opened my eyes. Mine ancient enemy walks often on the moors alone, attracted, though he may not know it, by ancestral urgings. And on one of these lonely walks I shall meet him, and when I meet him I will break his foul neck with my hands, as I, Ariara, broke the necks of foul night things in the long, long ago. Then they may take me and break my neck at the end of a rope if they will. I am not blind, if my friends are, and in sight of the old Aryan god, if not in the blinded eyes of men, I will have kept faith with my tribe. Mother of Pearl by Fitz James O'Brien. I wonder if I'm related. I met her in India when during an eccentric course of travel I visited the land of palanquins and hookahs. She was a slender, pale, spiritual-looking girl. Her figure swayed to and fro when she walked like some delicate plant brushed by a very gentle wind. Her face betokened a rare susceptibility of nervous organization. Large dark gray eyes spanned by slender arches of black eyebrows, irregular and mobile features, a mouth large and singularly expressive, and conveying vague hints of a sensual nature wherever she smiled. The paleness of her skin could hardly be called paleness. It was rather a skin could hardly be called paleness. It was beautiful transparency of texture, through the whiteness of which one beheld the underglow of life, as one sees the fires of a lamp hazily revealed through the white ground glass shade that envelops it. Her motions were full of a strange and subtle grace. It positively sent a thrill of an indefinable nature through me to watch her moving across the room. It was perhaps a pleasurable sensation at beholding her perform so ordinary an act in so unusual a manner. Every wanderer in the fields has been struck with delight on beholding a tuft of thistledown floating calmly through the still atmosphere of a summer day. She possessed in the most perfect degree this aerial serenity of motion. With all the attributes of body, she seemed to move as if disembodied. It was a singular and paradoxical combination of the real and ideal, and therein, I think, lay the charm. Then her voice. It was like no voice that I ever heard before. It was low and sweet, but how many hundreds of voices have I heard that were as low and just as sweet? The charm lay in something else. Each word was uttered with a sort of dove-like coo. Pray do not laugh at the image, for I am striving to express what after all is perhaps inexpressible. However, I mean to say that the harsh gutturals and hissing dentals of our English tongue were enveloped by her in a species of vocal plumage, so that they flew from her lips, not like pebbles or snakes, as they do from mine and yours, but like hummingbirds, soft and round, and imbued with a strange fascination of sound. We fell in love, married, and Minnie agreed to share my travel for a year, after which we were to repair my native place in Maine and settle down into a calm, loving country life. It was during this year that our little daughter Pearl was born. The way in which she came to be named Pearl was this. We were cruising in the bay of Ndachi on the west coast of Ceylon in a small vessel which I had hired for a month's trip to go where I listed. I had always a singular desire to make myself acquainted with the details of the pearl fishery, and I thought this would be a good opportunity. So with my wife and servants and little nameless child, she was only 3 months old, on whom, however, we showered daily 1,000 unwritable love titles, I set sail for the grounds of a celebrated pearl fishery. It was a great, although an idle pleasure, to sit in one of the small coasting boats in that cloudless and serene climate, floating on an unruffled sea, and watch the tawny natives, naked with the exception of a small strip of cotton cloth wound around their loins, plunge into the marvelously clear waters, and after having shot down for beyond sight, as if they had been lead instead of flesh and blood, suddenly break above the surface after what seemed an age of immersion, holding in their hands a basket filled with long, uncouthly shaped bivalves, any of which might contain a treasure great as that which Cleopatra wasted in her goblet. The oysters being flung into the boat, a brief breathing spell was taken, and then once more the dark-skinned diver darted down, like some agile fish, to recommence his search. For the pearl oyster is by no means to be found in the prodigal profusion in which his less aristocratic brethren, the millponds and blue points and chincoppins, exist. He is rare and exclusive, and does not bestow himself liberally. He, like all high-born castes, is not prolific. Sometimes a fearful moment of excitement would overtake us. While 2 or 3 of the pearl divers were under water, the calm, glassy surface of the sea would be cleft by what seemed the thin blade of a sharp knife, cutting through the water with a slow, even deadly motion. This we knew to be the dorsal fin of the man-eating shark. Nothing can give an idea of the horrible symbolism of that back fin. To be a person utterly unacquainted with the habits of the monster, the silent, stealthy, restless way in which that membranous blade divided the water would inevitably suggest a cruelty swift, unappeasable, relentless. This may seem exaggerated to anyone who has not seen the spectacle I speak of. Every seafaring man will admit its truth. When this ominous apparition became visible, all on board the fishing boats were instantly in a state of excitement. The water was beaten with oars until it foamed. The natives shouted aloud with the most unearthly yells. Missiles of all kinds were flung at this Siva of the ocean, and a relentless attack was kept up on him until the poor fellows, groping below, showed their mahogany faces above the surface. We were so fortunate as not to have been the spectators of any tragedy, but we knew from hearsay that it often happened that the shark, a fish, by the way, possessed of a rare intelligence, quietly bided his time until the moment the diver broke water, when there would be a lightning-like rush, a flash of the white belly, as the brute turned on his side, a snap, a faint cry of agony from the victim, and then the mahogany face would sink convulsed, never to rise again, while a great crimson clot of blood would hang suspended in the calm ocean, the red memorial of a sudden and awful fatality. One breathless day we were floating in our little boat at the pearl fishery watching the diving. We means my wife, myself, and our little daughter, who was nestled in the arms of her Aya, or colored nurse. It was one of those tropical mornings the glory of which is indescribable. The sea was so transparent that the boat in which we lay, shielded from the sun by awnings, seemed to hang suspended in air. The tufts of pink and white coral that studded the bed of the ocean beneath were as distinct as if they were growing at our feet. We seemed to be gazing upon a beautiful parterre of variegated candy tuft, the shores fringed with palms and patches of gigantic species of cactus, which was then in bloom, where still and serene as if they had been painted on glass. Indeed, the whole landscape looked like a beautiful scene beheld through a glorified stereoscope. Eminently real as far as detail went, but fixed and motionless as death. Nothing broke the silence save the occasional plunge of the divers into the water, or the noise of the large oysters falling into the bottom of the boats. In the instance, on a small narrow point of land, a strange crowd of human beings was visible. Oriental pearl merchants, fakirs selling amulets, Brahmins in their dirty white robes, all attracted to the spot by the prospect of gain, as fish collect round a handful of bait flung into a pond, bargaining, cheating, and strangely mingling religion and lucre. My wife and I lay back on the cushions that lined the aft part of our little skiff, languidly gazing on the sea and the sky by turns. Suddenly our attention was aroused by a great shout, which was followed by a volley of shrill cries from the pearl fishing boats. On turning in that direction, the greatest excitement was visible among the different crews. Hands were pointed, white teeth glittered in the sun, and every dusky form was gesticulating violently. Then 2 or 3 blacks seized some long poles and commenced beating the water. Violently others flung gourds and calabashes and odd pieces of wood and stones in the direction of a peculiar spot that lay between the nearest fishing boat and ourselves. The only thing visible in the spot was a black, sharp blade, thin as the blade of a penknife, that appeared, slowly and evenly cutting through the still water. No surgical instrument ever glided through human flesh with a more silent, cruel calm. It needed not the cry of "Shark! Shark!" to tell us what it was. In a moment we had a vivid picture of that unseen monster, with his small watchful eyes and his huge mouth with its double row of fangs. Presented to our mental vision, there were 3 divers under water at this moment, while directly above them hung suspended this remorseless incarnation of death. My wife clasped my hand convulsively and became deathly pale. I stretched out the other hand instinctively and grasped a revolver which lay beside me. I was in the act of cocking it when the shriek of unutterable agony from Aya burst in our ears. I turned my head quick as a flash of lightning and beheld her, with empty arms hanging over the gunwale of the boat, while down in the calm sea I saw a tiny little face, swathed in white, sinking, sinking, sinking. What are words to paint such a crisis? What pen, however vigorous, could depict the pallid, convulsed face of my wife, my own agonized countenance, and awful despair that settled on the dark face of the Aya, as we three beheld the love of our lives serenely receding from us forever in that impassable, transparent ocean. My pistol fell from my grasp. I, who rejoiced in a vigor of manhood such as a few attain, was struck dumb and helpless. My brain whirled in its dome. Every outward object vanished from my sight, and all I saw was a vast translucent sea, and one sweet face, rosy as a seashell, shining in its depths, shining with a vague smile that seemed to bid me a mute farewell as it floated away to death. I was roused from a trance of anguish by the flitting of a dark form through the clear water, cleaving its way swiftly toward that darling little shape, that grew dimmer and dimmer every second as it settled in the sea. We all saw it, and the same thought struck us all, that terrible, deadly back fin was the key of our sudden horror. The sharp, the simultaneous shriek burst from our lips. I tried to jump overboard, but was withheld by someone. Little use had I done so, for I could not swim a stroke. The dark shape glided on like a flash of light. It had reached our treasure. In an instant, all we loved on earth was blotted from our sight. My heart stood still, my breath ceased, life trembled on my hips. The next moment a dusky head shot out of the water, close to our boat. A dusky head whose parted lips gasped for breath, but whose eyes shone with the brightness of a superhuman joy. The second after, two tawny hands held a dripping white mess above the water, and the dark head shouted to the boatman. Another second, and the brave pearl diver had clambered in and laid my little daughter at her mother's feet. This was the shark? This was the man-eater? This hero in sunburned hide who, with his quick aquatic sight, had seen our dear one sinking through the sea, and had brought her up to us again, dull and dripping but still alive? What tears and what laughter fell on us three by turns as we named our gem, rescued from the ocean. Little Pearl. Oh, that's perfect. They're perfect little Pearl. Well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to go to our second music break where, you guessed it, we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage, who will be joining me and some friends of ours. Perhaps Rick Kirkby from the UK? Perhaps Jim Sims? Who knows? It's a surprise yet to be. But she's going to be singing, bottom line, Singing to Your Grave, Not a Phase, and Bury Me in Heaven. If you'd like to check her out in your free time, check her out on Instagram. Instagram under Antidote for Savages. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
right now between fear and love. Just a choice right now between fear and love.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. What we're getting back into our book here. 2. I had been about a year settled at my pleasant homestead in Maine when the great misfortune of my life fell upon me. My existence was almost exceptional in its happiness. Independent in the circumstances, master of a beautiful place, the natural charms of which were carefully seconded by art, married to a woman whose refined and cultivated mind seemed to be in perfect accord with my own, and the father of the loveliest little maiden that ever tottered upon tiny feet. What more I could wish for? In the summertime we varied pleasant monotony of our rustic life by flying visits to Newport and Nahant. In the winter, a month or 6 weeks spent in New York, party-going and theater-going surfeited us with the rapid life of the metropolis, but gave us food for conversation for months to come. The intervals were well filled up with farming, reading, and the social intercourse into which we naturally fell with the old residents around us. I said a moment ago that I was perfectly happy at this time. I was wrong. I was happy, but not perfectly happy. A vague grief overshadowed me. My wife's health gave me at times great concern. Charming and spiritual as she was on most occasions, there were times when she seemed a prey to a brooding melancholy. She would sit for hours in the twilight in what appeared to be a state of mental apathy, and at such times it was almost impossible to rouse her into even a moderate state of conversational activity. When I addressed her, she would languidly turn her eyes on me, droop the eyelids over the eyeballs, and gaze at me with a strange expression that, I knew not why, sent a shudder through my limbs. It was in vain that I questioned her to ascertain if she suffered. She was perfectly well, she said, but weary. I consulted my old friend and neighbor, Dr. Melanie, but after a careful study of her constitution, he proclaimed her, after his own fashion, to be sound as a bell, sir, sound as a bell. To me, however, there was a funeral tone in this bell. If it did not toll of death, it at least proclaimed disaster. I cannot say why those dismal forebodings should have possessed me. But who will explain the many presagencies of good and bad fortune which waylay men in the road of life? As the witches used to waylay the traveler of old and rise up in his path, prognosticating or cursing. At times, though many, as if to cheat speculation, displayed a gaiety and cheerfulness beyond all expectation. She would propose little excursions to noted places in our neighborhood, and no eyes in the party would be brighter, no laugh more ringing than hers. Yet those bright spots were but checkers on a life of gloom. Days passed in moodiness and silence, nights of restless tossing on the coach, and ever and anon that strange, furtive look following me as I went to and fro. As the year slowly sailed through the green banks of summer into the flaming scenery of the fall, I resolved to make some attempt to dissipate this melancholy under which my wife so obviously labored. "Minnie," I said to her one day, "I feel rather dull. Let us go to New York for a few weeks." "What for?" she answered, turning her face around slowly until her eyes rested on mine, eyes still filled with the inexplicable expression. "What for?" "To amuse ourselves, my dear Gerald. How can New York amuse you? We live in a hotel, each room of which is a stereotyped copy of the other. We get the same bill of fare, with a fresh date, every day for dinner. We go to parties that are a repetition of the parties we went to last year. The same thin-legged young man leads the Germans, and one could almost imagine that the stewed terrapin which you got for supper had been kept over since the previous winter. There is no novelty, no nothing. There is a novelty, my dear, I said, although I could not help smiling at her languid dissection of a New York season. You love the stage, and a new, and, as I am told, a great actress has appeared there. I, for my part, want to see her. Who is she? But before you answer, I know perfectly well what a great American dramatic novelty is. She has been gifted by nature with fine eyes, a good figure, and a voice which has a tolerable scale of notes. Someone or something puts it into her head that she was born into the world for the special purpose of interpreting Shakespeare. She begins by reciting to her friends in a little village, and owing to their encouragement determines to take lessons from some broken-down actor who omit an insufficient salary by giving lessons in elocution. Oh, hold on, I got an incoming. Under his tuition, as she would under the instruction of any professor of that abominable art known as elocution, she learns how to display her voice at the expense of the sense of the author. She thinks of nothing but rising and falling inflections, swimming entrances and graceful exits. Her idea of great emotion is hysterics, and her acme of byplay is to roll her eyes at the audience. You listen in vain for a natural intonation of the voice. You look in vain on the painted, overpainted face for a single reflex of the emotions depicted by the dramatist. Emotions that are sure, when he was registered them on paper, flitted over his countenance and thrilled his whole being as the auroral lights shimmer over the heavens. And scud a vibration through all nature. My dear husband, I am tired of your great American actress. Please go and buy me half a dozen dolls. I laughed. She was in cynical mood, and none could be more sarcastic than she, but I was determined to gain my point. But, I resumed, the actress I am anxious to see is the very reverse of the too truthful picture you have painted. I want to see Matilda Heron. And who is Matilda Heron? Well, I can't very well answer your question definitely, Minnie, but this I know, that she has come from somewhere and fallen like a bombshell in New York. The metaphor is not too pronounced. Her appearance has been an explosion. Now, you blaze critic of actresses, here is a chance for a sensation. Will you go? Of course I will, dear Gerald, but if I am disappointed, call on the gods to help you. I will punish you if you mislead me in some awful manner. I'll write a play or go on the stage myself. Minnie, said I, kissing her smooth white forehead, if you go on the stage, you will make a most miserable failure. 3. We went to New York. Matilda Heron was then playing her first engagement at Wallack's Theatre. The day after I arrived, I secured a couple of orchestra seats, and before the curtain rose, Minnie and I were installed in our places. I full of anticipation. She, as all prejudging critics are, determined to be terribly severe if she got a chance. We were too well bred, too well brought up, too well educated, and too cosmopolitan to feel any qualms about the morality of the play. We had read it in the French under the title of La Dame aux Camélias, and it was now produced in dramatic form under the title of Camille. If my wife did not get a chance for criticism, she at least got a sensation. Miss Heron's first entrance was wonderfully unconventional. The woman dared to come in upon the painted scene as if it really was the home apartment, it was represented to be. She did not slide in with her face to the audience and wait for the mockery that is called a reception. She walked in easily, naturally, unwitting of any outside eyes. The petulant manner in which she took off her shawl, commonplace conversational tone in which she spoke to her servant, were revelations of Minnie and myself. Here was a daring reality. Here was a woman who, sacrificing for the moment all conventional prejudices, dared to play the lorette as the lorette herself plays her dramatic life. With all her whims, her passion, her fearlessness of consequences, her occasional vulgarities, her impertinence, her tenderness, and self-sacrifice, it was not that we did not see faults. Occasionally, Miss Heron's accent was bad and had a savor of Celtic origin. What mattered accent, or what mattered elocution, when we felt ourselves in the presence of an inspired woman? Miss Heron's Camille electrified both Minnie and myself. My wife was particularly bouleversée. The artist we were beholding had not, in a very marked manner, any of those physical advantages which Minnie had predicted in her onslaught of the dramatic stars. It is true that Miss Heron's figure was commanding, and there was a certain powerful light in her eyes that startled and thrilled, but there was not the beauty of the favorite actress. The conquest that she achieved was purely intellectual and magnetic. Of course, we were present at the next performance. It was Medea. We then beheld the great actress under a new phase. In Camille, she died for love. In Medea, she killed for love. I never saw a human being so rocked by emotion as was my wife during the progress of this tragedy. Her countenance was a mirror of every incident and passion. She swayed to and fro under those gusts of indignant love that the actress sent forth from time to time and which swept the house like a storm. When the curtain fell, she sat trembling, vibrating still with those thunders of passion that the swift lightnings of genius had awakened. She seemed almost in a dream as I took her to the carriage, and during the drive to our hotel she was moody and silent. It was in vain that I tried to get her to converse about the play, that the actress was great. She acknowledged in the briefest possible sentence. Then she leaned back and seemed to fall into a reverie from which nothing would arouse her. I ordered supper into our sitting room and made Minnie drink a couple of glasses of champagne in the hope that it would rouse her into some state of mental activity. All my efforts, however, were without avail. She was silent and strange, and occasionally shivered as if penetrated with a sudden chill. Shortly after, she pleaded weariness and retired for the night, leaving me puzzled more than ever by the strangeness of her case. Sorry, guys. An hour or two afterward, when I went to bed, I found Minnie apparently asleep. Never had she seemed more beautiful. Her lips were like a bursting rosebud about to blow under the influence of the perfumed wind, just parted as they were by the gentle breath that came and went. The long dark lashes that swept over her cheek gave a pensive charm to her countenance, which was heightened by a rich stray of nutty hair that swept loosely across her bosom, lost in the restlessness of slumber. I printed a light kiss upon her forehead, and with an unuttered prayer for her welfare, lay down to rest. I know not how long I had been asleep when I was awakened from a profound slumber by one of those indescribable sensations of mortal peril which seem to sweep over the soul, and with, as it were, the thrill of its passage call louder than a trumpet, "Awake! Arouse!" Your life hangs by a hair. That this strange physical warning is in all cases the result of a magnetic phenomenon, I have not the slightest doubt. To prove it, still softly, ever so softly, to the bedside of a sleeper, and although no noise betrays your presence, the slumberer will almost invariably awaken, aroused by a magnetic perception of your proximity. How much more powerfully must the stealthy approach of one who harbors sinister designs affect the slumbering victim? An antagonistic magnetism hovers near. The whole of the subtle currents that course through the electrical machine known as man are shocked with a powerful repulsion. And the sentinel mind, whose guard has just been relieved and which is slumbering in its quarters, suddenly hears the rappel beaten and leaps to arms. In the midst of my deep sleep, I sprang with a sudden bound upright, with every faculty alert. By one of those unaccountable mysteries of our being, I realized, before my eyes could be by any possibility alive to external objects, the presence of a great horror. Simultaneously with this conviction, or following it so quickly as to be almost twin with it, I beheld the vivid flash of a knife, and felt an acute pain in my shoulder. The next instant all was plain, as if the scene, instead of passing in a half-illuminated bedroom, had occurred in the full sunlight of the Orient. My wife was standing by my bedside, her hands firmly pinioned in mine, while on the white coverlet lay a sharp table knife red with blood, which was pouring from a deep wound in my shoulder. I had escaped death by a miracle. Another instant and the long blade would have been driven through my heart. I never was so perfectly self-possessed as on that terrible occasion. I forced Minnie to sit on the bed. While I looked calmly into her face, she returned my gaze with a sort of serene defiance. "Minnie," I said, "I loved you dearly. Why did you do this?" "I was weary of you," she answered in a cold, even voice, a voice so level that it seemed to be spoken on ruled lines. "That is my reason." Great heavens, I was not prepared for this sanguinary of calm. I had looked for perhaps sonic indication of somnambulism, and I had vaguely hoped even for the incoherence or vehemence of speech which would have betokened a sudden insanity, everything but this awful avowal of the deliberate design to murder a man who loved her better than the life she sought. Still I clung to hope. I could not believe that this gentle, refined creature could deliberately quit my side at midnight, possess herself of the very knife which had been used at the table, across which I lavished 1,000 food attentions, and remorselessly endeavor to stab me to the heart. It must be the act of one insane, or laboring under some momentary hallucination. I determined to test her further. I adopted a tone of vehement reproach, hoping, if insanity was smoldering in her brain, to fan the embers to such a flame as would leave no doubt on my mind. I would rather she should be mad than feel that she hated me. "Woman," I thundered fiercely, "you must have the mind of a fiend to repay my love in this manner. Beware of my vengeance. Your punishment shall be terrible." "Punish me," she answered, and oh, how serene and distant her voice sounded. "Punish me how and when you will. It will not matter much." The tones were calm, assured, and fearless, the manner perfectly coherent. A terrible suspicion shot across my mind. "Have I a rival?" I asked. "Is it a guilty love that has prompted you to plan my death? If so, I am sorry you did not kill me." "I do not know any other man whom I love. I cannot tell why it is that I do not love you. You are very kind and considerate, but your presence wearies me. I sometimes see vaguely, as in a dream, my ideal of a husband, but he has no existence saving my soul, and I suppose I shall never meet him." Minnie, you are mad, I cried despairingly. Am I? She answered with a faint, sad smile slowly overspreading her pale face like the dawn breaking imperceptibly over a cold gray lake. Well, you can think of this, so if you will, it is all one to me. I never beheld such apathy, such stoical indifference. Had she exhibited fierce rage, disappointment at her failure, a mad thirst for my lifeblood? I should have preferred it to this awful stagnation of sensibility, this frozen stillness of the heart. I felt all my nature harden suddenly toward her. It seemed to me as if my face became fixed and stern as a bronze head. You are an inexplicable monster, I said in tones that startled myself. They were so cold and metallic, and I shall not try to decipher you. I will use every endeavor to assertion, however, whether it is some species of insanity that has this afflicted you, or whether you are ruled by the most vicious soul that ever inhabited a human body. You shall return to my house tomorrow, when I will place you under the charge of Dr. Melanie. You will live in the strictest seclusion. I need not tell you that. After what has happened, you must henceforth be a stranger to your daughter. Hands crimsoned with her father's blood are not those that I would see caressing her. Very well. It is all one to me where I am or how I live. Go to bed. She went calmly, as well-taught child, coolly turning over the pillow on which was sprinkled with blood from the wound in my shoulder, so as to present the underside for her beautiful guilty head to repose on. Gently removed the murderous knife which was still lying on the coverlet and placed it on a little table by the side of the bed, and then without a word calmly composed herself to sleep. It was inexplicable. I staunched my wound and sat down to think. What was the meaning of it all? I had visited many lunatic asylums and had, as one of the various items in my course of study, read much on the phenomena of insanity, which had always been exceedingly interesting to me for this reason. I thought it might be that only through the aberrated intellect can we approach the secrets of the normal mind. The castle, fortified and garrisoned at every angle and loophole, guards its interior mysteries. It is only when the fortress crumbles that we can force our way inside and detect the secret of its masonry, its form, and the theory of its construction. But in all my researches, I had never met with any symptoms of a diseased mind similar to these my wife exhibited. There was a uniform coherence that completely puzzled me. Her answers to my questions were complete and determinate. That is, they left no room for what is called cross-examination. No man ever spent such a night of utter despair as I did, watching in that dimly lit chamber until dawn, while she, my would-be murderess, lay plunged in so profound and calm a slumber that she might have been a wearied angel rather than a self-possessed demon. The mystery of her guilt was maddening, and I sat hour after hour in my easy chair seeking in vain for a clue, until the dawn, spectral and gray, arose over the city. Then I packed up all our luggage and wandered restlessly over the house until the usual hour for rising had struck. On returning to my room, I found my wife just completing her toilet. To my consternation and horror, she flung herself into my arms as I entered. "Gerald," she cried, "I have been so frightened. What has brought all this blood on the pillow and the sheets? Where have you been? When I awoke and missed you and discovered these stains, I knew not what to think. Are you hurt? What is the matter?" I stared at her. There was not a trace of conscious guilt in her countenance. It was the most consummate acting. Its very perfection made me the more relentless. "There is no necessity for this hypocrisy," I said. "I will not alter my resolve. We depart for home today. Our luggage is packed, the bills are all paid. Speak to me, I pray you, as little as possible. What is it? Am I dreaming? Oh, Gerald, my darling, what have I done? Or what has come over you? She almost shrieked these queries. You know as well as I do, you fair-faced monster, you tried to murder me last night when I was asleep. There's your mark on my shoulder, a loving signature, is it not? I bared my shoulder as I spoke and exposed the wound. She gazed wildly in my face for a moment, then tottered and fell. I lifted her up and placed her on the bed. She did not faint and had strength enough left to ask me to leave her alone for a few moments. I quitted her with a glance of contempt and went downstairs to make arrangements for our journey. After an absence of about an hour, I returned to our apartments. I found her sitting placidly in an easy-chair looking out of the window. She scarcely noticed my entrance, and the same old distant look was on her face. We start at 3 o'clock, are you ready? I said to her. Yes, I need no preparation, evenly and calmly uttered, without even turning her head to look at Nye. You have recovered your memory, it seems, I said. You wasted your histrionic talents this morning. Did I? She smiled with the most perfect serenity, arranged herself more easily in her chair, and leaned back, as if in a reverie. I was enraged beyond endurance and left the room abruptly. That evening saw us on our way home. Throughout the journey, she maintained the same apathetic air. We scarcely exchanged a word. The instant we reached our house, I assigned apartments to her, strictly forbidding her to move from them, and dispatched a messenger for Dr. Melanie. Minnie, on her part, took possession of her prison without a word. She did not even ask to see our darling little Pearl, who was 1,000 times more beautiful and engaging than ever. Melanie arrived, and I laid the awful facts before him. The poor man was terribly shocked. Depend on it, it's opium, he said. Let me see her. An hour afterward he came to me. It's not opium, and it's not insanity, he said. It must be somnambulism. I find symptoms, however, that puzzle me beyond all calculation. That she is not in her normal condition of mind is evident, but I cannot discover the cause of this unnatural excitement. She is coherent, logical, but perfectly apathetic to all outward influences. At first I was certain that she was a victim of opium. Now I feel convinced that I was entirely wrong. It must be somnambulism. I will reside for a time in the house and trust me to discover this mystery. Meanwhile, she must be carefully watched. Melanie was as good as his word. He watched her incessantly and reported to me her condition. The poor man was dreadfully puzzled. The strictest surveillance failed to elicit the slightest evidence of her taking any stimulants, although she remained almost all the time in the apathetic state which was so terrible to behold. The doctor endeavored to arouse her by reproaches for her attempt on my life. She in return only smiled and replied that it was a matter in which she had no further interest. Not a trance of any somnambulistic habit could be discovered. I was thoroughly wretched. I secluded myself from all society but that of Melanie, and had it not been for him and my darling little Pearl, I am certain that I should have gone mad. The most of my days I spent wandering in the great woods which lay in the neighborhood of my farm, and my evenings I endeavored to divert with reading or a chat with a good doctor. Yet talk of what we might, the conversation would always return to the same melancholy topic. It was a maze of sorrow in which we invariably, no matter in what direction we wandered, brought up at the same spot. 4. The The doctor and myself were sitting one evening late in my library, talking gloomily enough over my domestic tragedy. He was endeavoring to persuade me to look more brightly on the future, to dismay as far as possible from my mind an accursed horror that dwelt in my home, and to remember that I had still a dear object left on which to center my affections. This allusion to little Pearl in such a mood as I was then in only served to heighten my agony. I began immediately to revolve the chances that, where my wife's disease really insanity, it would be perpetuated in my dear child. Melanie, of course, pooh-poohed the idea, but with the obstinacy of grief I clung to it, and suddenly a pause took place in the argument, and the dreary sounds that fill the air in the last nights of autumn swept around the house. The wind soughed through the tree-tops, which were now almost bare, as if moaning at being deprived of its leafy playmates. Inexplicable noises passed to and fro without the windows. Dead leaves rustled along the piazza like the rustle of the garments of ghosts. Chilly draughts came from unseen crevices, blowing on back and cheek till one felt as if one invisible lips were close behind, pouring malignant breaths on face and shoulder. Suddenly the pause in our conversation was filled by a noise that we knew came neither from air nor dry leaf. We heard sounding through the night the muffled tread of footsteps. I knew that except ourselves the household had long since retired to bed. By a simultaneous action we both sprang to our feet and rushed to a door which opened into a long corridor leading to the nursery, and which communicated by a series of rambling passages with the main body of the house. As we flung back the door, a light appeared at the further end and advanced slowly towards us. It was borne by a tall white figure. It was my wife. Calm and stately, and with her wonderful serene step, she approached. My heart was frozen when I saw spots of blood on her hands and nightrobe. I gave a wild cry and rushed past her. In another instant, I was in the baby's room. The night light was burning dimly. The colored nurse was sleeping calmly in her bed, while in a little cot in another part of the room I saw. I'll tell it. Cannot. Well, little Pearl was murdered. Murdered. My darling lay. It was I now who was insane. I rushed back into the corridor and slayed the fiend who had done this horrible deed. I had no mercy for her then. I would have killed her 1,000 times over. Great heaven! She was leaning against the wall, conversing as calmly with the doctor as if nothing had happened, smoothing her hair with her reddened fingers, nonchalant as if an evening party. I ran at her to crush her. Melanie leaped between us. "Stop!" he cried. "The secret is out." And as he spoke, he held up a little silver box containing what seemed to be a greenish paste. "It is hashish, and she is confessing." Her statement was the most awful thing I ever listened to. It was as deliberate as a lawyer's brief. She had contracted this habit in the East, she said, long before I knew her, and could not break it off. It wound her nature in chains of steel. By degrees it grew upon her, until it became her very life. Her existence lay, as it were, in a nutshell, but the shell was to her universe. One night, she continued, when she was under the influence of the drug, she went with me to see a play in which the wife abhors her husband and murders her children. It was Medea. From that instant, murder became glorified in the sight through the medium of the spell-working drug. Her soul became wrapped in the contemplation of the spilling of blood. I was to have been her first victim, Pearl her second. She ended by saying with an ineffable smile that the delight of the taking away of life was beyond imagination. I suppose I must have fainted, for when I awoke from what seemed oblivion, I found myself in bed with Dr. Melanie by my side. He laid his finger on his lip and whispered to me that I had been very ill and must not talk, but I could not restrain myself. "Where is she?" I muttered. "Where she ought to be," he answered, and then caught faintly the words, "Private madhouse." Oh, hashish, demon of a new paradise, spiritual whirlwind, I know you now. You blackened my life, you robbed me of all I held dear, but you have since consoled me. You thought, wicked enchanter, that you had destroyed my peace forever, but I have won, through you yourself, the bliss you once blotted out. Vanished past, hence present, out upon actuality, hand in hand I walk with the conqueror of time, and space, and suffering, bend all who hear me to his worship. That's messed up. Oh my god. This story was so messed up. Oh my goodness. Alright, the next one is The Walking Dead, and we'll start it, but we're not going to get very far because we only have a short amount of time. Alright, we're going to get into it, but I have set an alarm because I know I will read over and not be able to say goodbye. But The Walking Dead by E. Hoffman Price. When Walt Connell heard the different tapping at the back door, he assumed an expression of judicial sternness. Plato Jones, who spedded Connell's garden, must be returning with a fantastic story to account for a week's absence and the $6 which Connell had given him to buy some orange wine. But it was Plato's wife who tapped at the door, a plump, comely black woman with a small parcel under her arm. "Evening, Mr. Walt," she began. "My man Plato ain't come back yet." Tears were streaming down her face. Connell was saddled with a problem. Taking on a servant entailed responsibilities. He'd have to help her somehow. "That no-good man of yours probably drank my orange wine and now is afraid to come back," Connell said. "No, sir. No, sir," Millie protested. "Plato don't drink nothing." "Well, maybe I can help," Connell temporized. "Yes, sir, Mr. Walt." Millie beamed through her tears. "I knew you'd take care of me." She thrust into his hands a paper-wrapped parcel. "I baked y'all chocolate cake for lunch when you go to get that no-good man, and I fixed up some salted cashew nuts, too." Her guile had caught him totally off guard. He had accepted the present, nothing to do but resign himself to a 60-mile drive down the Mississippi Delta, where the Cajuns convert undersized oranges into fragrant blasting wine. No man. Sorry. What the hell? Where did it go? No man's land, where a century or more ago Lafitte's pirates found refuge. The next morning, Connell thrust Amelia's gift of chocolate cake and cashew nuts into the parcel compartment and headed down the West Bank. He spent the forenoon searching small-town jails as he worked his way down the Delta, but no news of Plato. His last chance was Venice, at the end of the highway. Venice was half a dozen shacks plus a general store not much larger than a piano box. The girl behind the counter was uncommonly attractive, one of those substantial Cajun women with luxurious curves and plump, firm breasts, as inviting as her amiable smile. Connell, however, managed to shift his glance to her dark eyes and began his oft-repeated query concerning Plato and his red flivver. Marie shook her head. Her eyes suddenly became somber, and she said, "You're too late." "What do you mean?" Connell, catching her by the wrist, felt her tremble. "I didn't have any orange wine," she began, lowering her voice almost to a whisper. "So he went back." Something was distinctly salty. "You'd better tell me," he said in a quiet voice that impelled her attention. was wavering, but she was afraid. Finally, she compromised. "We can talk better in the back here." Connell followed her to the rear of the tiny store. The crude, primitive room contained an oil stove, a small wooden table. In the further corner was a bed. "You won't never see your man again," began Marie, drawing up a chair for Connell. "Not with walking dead men like they got at Ducoin's plantation." "Walking dead men," he echoed, leaping to his feet. "Who's Ducoin? What?" But Connolly's query was cut short. The Cajun girl's hand closed about his arm, drawing him to her side. "I'll tell you later," she whispered. Her dark, smoldering eyes were still haunted, but her lips suggested reasons for delay. Under other circumstances, Connell would have welcomed the hint, but something about her furtive glance and unnatural eagerness combined with her sinister remarks to repel it. But Connell made little progress. As he drew away, her arm slipped about his neck, and her ripe, voluptuous curves pressed him closely as she pleaded. "Don't go. I'm terribly scared." She was, but Connell wasn't. And that warm, plump body was as inflaming as orange wine. Well, it appears we are at the end of our time, and I wasn't very good at setting my alarm. I was a bit off. But thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. It was my pleasure hanging out with you. I'm so glad you made it this evening, and that you're here safe with me, not out there in the crazy world. Or maybe you are, and I'm just along for the ride. Thank you to all my friends out there, wherever you may be listening, Beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time, and can't wait to do it again next time, whenever that may be. Hopefully before the weekend, but maybe not. Things tend to come up. Don't forget, we're all in this together. Together we can make the world better, and together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. You guys remember to stay strong, eat healthy, stay hydrated, so you are nice and strong to fight tyranny and oppression. Resist fascism and persevere. I'll see you next time. Night night, love and light. Take care of my ewes. TNT signing off.